Hey everyone, Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys an old school album review. And today we're going to be looking into this album's 30-year anniversary, and it's from the gods, the creators of heavy metal themselves. And this album was kind of a little bit underrated and not really talked about as much. As you can see below the title, today we're going to be talking about Tear by Black Sabbath, the band's 15th album released in August 20th, 1990 through IRS Records. Now, with this album, it follows up 1989's Headless Cross, and that was sort of like their last album in the 80s, and now we're into the 90s era of Black Sabbath. And with this album compared to Headless Cross, it's more of a departure, like lyrically, whereas Headless Cross is more like darker tone. But I feel like with a Tear, while I've heard it's not really a concept album, but some of the titles and other things sort of like talk about like Norse mythology and stuff. And like I said, this kind of like is a bit different compared to like other albums that we've heard. One thing to note about is the vocal work. The vocal work on this album is done by Tony Martin, and he does a pretty good job at some of the songs. Guitar wise, Tony Iommi, he's the riff god. Like this album musically, it's totally different from what you've heard so far from Sabbath, which has a little bit of occasional stuff here and there from what we've heard from older albums, but it's totally different. Bass wise, it's so weird not hearing like Geezer Butler on an album, but instead they had Neil Murray handle the bass tracks. And drumming wise, Cozy Powell does a good job on the drums. And keyboard wise, from the unofficial fifth member, Jeff Nichols, does like the keyboards kind of have a little bit of a depth to it, a little bit more of an atmospheric vibe to it. But yeah, without further ado, let's just dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is Anno Mundi, which starts off very cult-like, and then the guitarists come in, and I think this has some really great riffs on here, and it just has good crushing songs. And I feel like Tony's has like very good vocals, sort of like backing like sort of like the guitars from Tony. But overall it's a pretty solid opener. I like it. Next song on here is called The Lawmaker, which kind of tempo wise it sort of like picks things up a bit, and in my opinion it's probably the fastest Sabbath song. Again, this song is in speed or usual for like other bands, but it's not like a band like Black Sabbath, who are more kind of like slower and more doomy like. And then we go on to Jerusalem, which explodes and has a really great riff, and it's just a typical ordinary Sabbath song, which isn't bad at all. Then we go on to the next song on the album, which is called The Sabbath Stones, which just explodes into a really great riff in there. Then we go on to The Battle of Tear, which is an instrumental, which is a kind of a filler, but it's like only like a little over a minute long. I feel like, in my opinion, it doesn't really add much to the album. It sort of like takes away sort of like the flow and the momentum that we've heard so far on the album. I feel like it would have done better if it would have been like sort of like the intro track on here, or just not on the album at all. But that's just me. Then we go on to the next song on the album, which is called Odin's Court, which is a pretty nice track in itself, and Tony just gives a great performance. And I feel like the keyboards from Jeff just pretty much adds well to sort of like the storytelling of the song. Then we go on to Valhalla, which kind of like has a really heavy and just a great triumphant riff. And Tony just brings another great performance and just a really catchy chorus, and I just like the power and the emotion behind the song. It's just absolutely great. Then we go on to Feels Good for Me, which is I didn't really care for this song. It's pretty much a very boring kind of like power ballad. While it's an absolutely boring track, I just feel like it's just so unfitting with literally every other song that we've heard so far on this album. Well, I sort of like every song sort of like follows sort of like the Norse in mythology or sort of like fantasy themes. I feel like it's just so out of place. Like this should not have been on the album. And then we close things off with Heaven is Black, which I think is a perfect way to end this album. And this could have been like the first single released to help promote the album. It's just a very catchy song. It's just a fun song to just jam out to. Now, overall, Tear by Black Sabbath is a pretty decent album. Like, there's a couple things like I wish they could have done a little bit better, and I really wish they would have just stuck with what they were done. But overall, it's not bad, and it's not the greatest, but it's all right. So if I were to give this album a score, I'm gonna give Tear by Black Sabbath a 7 out of 10. So yep, that's my review of the album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the album, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.